Welcome to Silent Queen's Calling. I'm glad you're here. Now let's get into the story. She was standing at the arrivals gate of Portland International Airport holding 2 cups of coffee. One for herself, one for her husband, when he walked past her without stopping. Not a glance. Not a wave. Not even the small, distracted acknowledgement a person gives a stranger whose face seems vaguely familiar. He walked past her with his phone to his ear, laughing at something the other person said. And she watched him cross the terminal and push through the glass doors to the rideshare lane without once looking back. The coffee in her right hand was exactly how he liked it. 2 sugars, no cream, medium roast. She had ordered it from the cart near baggage claim because she knew his flight landed at 7:14. And he was always hungry and impatient after a red-eye from Chicago. She had been doing this for 6 years, meeting him, knowing his order, showing up before he asked. She stood at the arrivals gate for a moment after the doors closed behind him. Then she drank both coffees, one after the other, standing in the middle of the terminal while travelers moved around her like water around a stone. Then she walked to the parking garage, drove home alone, and began to make a decision she had been postponing for longer than she was willing to admit. Her name was Viveka Lorne. To her husband, to his family, to every person inside the tight, self-congratulatory world she had inhabited for 6 years, she was simply Viv, the quiet one, the one who handled things, the accountant who kept reasonable hours and came home on time and made dinner and remembered everyone's birthdays and never made noise about any of it. The woman who was efficient, reliable, pleasant enough, and never quite interesting. What none of them knew, what she had spent 6 years carefully and deliberately concealing, was that Viveka Lorne was born Viveka Aldrin Moorfield, the only child of Constance and Harold Moorfield, founders of Moorfield Capital Partners, a private equity firm with a portfolio that spanned biotech, infrastructure, and energy storage across 9 states. Harold had died when Viveka was 22, leaving the firm in trust until Viveka reached 35. She was 34 in 9 months. The trust had a very specific activation date, and it was 11 weeks away. Forbes had never successfully profiled the Moorfield family because Harold had structured the firm's holdings to resist exactly that kind of attention. He did not believe in public wealth. He believed in private leverage. Viveka had grown up understanding the difference between the two the way other children learn the difference between indoor and outdoor voices. Instinctively, early, and with the knowledge that using the wrong one in the wrong place had consequences. Her mother, Constance, was still alive. She lived in a white house on the Oregon coast with 2 cats named after Supreme Court justices, and a garden she tended with the focused devotion of a woman who had spent 40 years being formidable and was now in her 70s learning to be peaceful. She called Viveka every Sunday. She had never liked the husband. She had said so once, clearly, and then never raised it again, because Constance Moorfield did not repeat herself. Viveka had come to Portland at 26 after graduate school to run a small accounting practice her mother had quietly established for her under her mother's maiden name, which was Lorne. The practice was real. She worked real hours and had real clients and paid real taxes. The work was not a front. It was a test, her own test, designed by her for herself. She needed to know what she could build without the name. She needed to know who would show up for her when she was simply Viveka Lorne, CPA, who drove a reliable Toyota and wore sensible clothes, and did not mention that the house she paid for in cash had nothing to do with her accounting salary. She had met Owen Callister at a client's dinner party. He was a commercial architect, mid-level, the kind of handsome that photographs well and fades slowly. He had good posture and a firm handshake, and he remembered her name when he saw her 3 weeks later at a coffee shop, which she noted. He asked questions. He followed up. He showed up when he said he would. She ran her usual assessment. It had taken years to calibrate, but by 30, she could determine within a single conversation whether someone was drawn to her or drawn to what they assumed she represented. Owen did not register as calculating. He was charming in the way of people who were raised to be charming, but it was not transactional. He seemed, in the early months, genuinely interested in who she was rather than what she was worth, which she had constructed with considerable care to appear worth very little. They married in year 2. Small wedding. Her mother attended and hugged Viveka for a long time at the reception without saying anything, which said everything. Owen gave a toast that was mostly about himself, which Viveka filed away as data. The marriage settled into a shape she had not expected, but recognized things immediately once she was inside it. She ran the household, all of it, the mortgage, paid from her accounting income because the test required it. The insurance, the utilities, the quarterly tax filings for both of them, the grocery planning, the dry cleaning schedule, the calendar management that kept Owen's professional life organized. Owen contributed his income to a joint account he checked sporadically and opinions about where they should vacation. She did not resent this immediately. She had been efficient her whole life. Managing systems was not a burden to her. It was a default mode. But there is a difference between a person who handles things because they are good at it and a person who handles things because no one else will. The first is a strength. The second is a trap. She did not understand which one she was in until year 4. When she realized she could not remember the last time Owen had asked how she was doing in a way that expected a real answer. Owen's mother was named Phyllis Callister. She was a retired dental office manager from Beaverton who had raised Owen as evidence of her own success and spent the remainder of her retirement protecting that evidence from revision. She was not warm. She was cordial in the particular way of people who have confused cordiality with kindness and cannot understand why the distinction matters. She visited often. She commented constantly in the soft, concerned register of a woman who wanted it understood she was helping. You must be so busy with your little practice, Viv. I hope you still have time to take care of Owen properly. Men noticed these things more than they let on. Viveka's practice was billing $400,000 a year, and she had taken care of Owen for 6 years with the thoroughness of a woman running a small nonprofit for one. She did not say either of these things. She offered Phyllis more lemon cake and refreshed her tea. Phyllis had a daughter, Owen's younger sister, named Britt. Britt worked in marketing and had the specific social confidence of someone who had never been asked to prove anything. She called Viveka practical, always in the tone of a compliment that wasn't. You're so practical, Viv. Like, you just handle things. Owen's so lucky he found someone practical. Practical. Viveka absorbed the word and placed it in the part of her mind where she kept the complete and growing record of everything this family had said to her that they would one day wish they could take back. She found out about the other woman on a Tuesday in March. She was not looking. She was doing what she always did on Tuesday evenings, reconciling the household accounts, while Owen was ostensibly at a planning board meeting. She was reviewing a credit card statement because one of the charges looked unfamiliar, and then 2 of them did, and then 5. A restaurant called Helio, a hotel downtown called the Alderton. 3 charges at a wine bar she had never heard of, on evenings when she had been home alone, eating leftovers and answering client emails. She set the laptop down on the kitchen table. She picked up her tea. She drank it slowly and felt something very precise move through her. Not rage, not heartbreak, but the specific, terrible clarity of a person who has just had confirmed something they had been refusing to name for months. She opened a new spreadsheet. Over the next 6 weeks, she assembled a complete picture with the methodical competence she had applied to every problem in her adult life. Credit card records going back 14 months, hotel charges, phone records. She obtained through means she did not find difficult, because she knew exactly what to look for and where to look for it. She parked across from his office twice. At times she had calculated from the phone patterns and watched him leave with a woman in a camel coat who got into his passenger seat and touched his face before he pulled out of the lot. The woman's name was Deanna Solt. She was 31. She worked in Owen's firm as a junior designer. She had a public Instagram account and no apparent awareness that the woman who had been ironing Owen Callister's dress shirts for 6 years was watching her tag him in a restaurant photo the same night he had told Viveka he was working late. Viveka documented everything. She organized the evidence by date, cross-referenced, backed up to 3 separate secure locations. She approached it the way she approached a difficult audit, without emotion, without assumption, following only what the numbers actually said. The numbers said 14 months. The numbers said it had started approximately 1 month after Viveka told Owen she thought she might want to try for a child. He had responded positively, she remembered. He had said he thought the timing was right. He had never brought it up again. She felt the load-bearing wall shift inside her. Not collapse, adjust. The test was over. The result was final. She had hidden her name and her money to find a person who would see her clearly, and she had found a person who had never looked. Her father had told her, the week before he died, that the only thing worse than being underestimated was allowing it to continue past the point of usefulness. She had let it continue for 6 years. That was long enough. She was about to demonstrate what the end of patience looks like when it belongs to a Moorfield. The night it ended publicly was a Friday in October. Owen's firm was hosting a client appreciation dinner at a restored event space in the Pearl District. Owen had invited Viveka. He had said it casually, the week before, in the manner of a man who expects attendance without asking for presents. She had said she would come. She had bought a dress. She had arranged a sitter for their cat, a gray tabby named Huxley, who required evening medication for a kidney condition Owen did not know about because he had never once taken Huxley to the vet. Viveka arrived at the event knowing what she would find. She had confirmed it 3 days earlier. Deanna Solt was also on the guest list. Viveka had seen the digital RSVP confirmation in Owen's email, which she could access, because she had set up his email account in year 1, and he had never changed the password. Deanna was listed as attending with a +1 she did not appear to have brought. Owen had been the one to add her to the list. Viveka had a screenshot. She walked into the event. Owen was at the bar with 3 colleagues, already mid-conversation, already mid-performance. He saw her, registered her presence, and lifted his glass slightly in her direction before turning back to the group. Not a greeting, a receipt. She found her seat. She ate the appetizers. She watched Owen work the room with the fluid, practiced ease of a man who was good at rooms. She watched Deanna Solt across the venue in a green dress, tracking Owen from a distance with the specific awareness of someone trying to appear unaware. She watched Phyllis, who had arrived with Brit, settle into a table near the window with the quiet authority of someone managing a seating chart in their own mind. Phyllis found Viveka at the appetizer station 40 minutes in. "You look tired, Viv. Is work very busy right now? You should try to carve out more rest. Owen mentioned you've been a little stretched thin." She tilted her head, concerned. "It's important to be present for your husband, especially at his events." His events. This was Owen's event. Viveka was a guest at Owen's event in a life that Viveka had largely built. She set down her plate. "Thank you, Phyllis," she said. "I appreciate the concern." She walked back to the table. She picked up her bag. She walked out. She walked out through the main entrance and onto the sidewalk, and the night air was cold and clean and smelled like rain that hadn't started yet. She stood on the curb for a moment. Owen came out behind her. She heard the door before she heard his voice. "Viveka." Not a question, not a concern. A management tone, the voice he used when something was not going according to plan. "What are you doing? You can't leave. This is a professional event. There are clients." "Owen," she said, and something in her voice made him stop. "You have been sleeping with Deanna Solt for 14 months. I have documentation going back to September of last year. Hotels, credit card records, photographs. The file is organized. My attorney has a copy." She watched the color drain from his face in a sequence she found almost clinical. "Viv, I also know," she continued, at the same pace without raising her voice, "that you told your mother and your sister about the situation before you told me there was a situation." "The group text, Owen." "I am not on the group text. I have never been on the group text. But Brit screenshots and she has an old password on her phone that she hasn't changed since the year we got married, and I set that one up too." He opened his mouth. "Don't," she said. She pulled out her phone. She made a call. It rang twice. 40 minutes later, a black car pulled to the curb. Her mother's personal driver, Gus, stepped out and opened the rear door without a word. Viveka got in. The door closed. The car pulled into traffic and was gone. Owen stood on the sidewalk in front of his own professional event, in front of colleagues and clients who had begun to filter out for air, watching his wife disappear in a car that he did not recognize, and that was, he would later find out, registered to a company he had never heard of. He went back inside. He found Deanna. He told her nothing because he did not yet understand what there was to tell. He would not understand for quite some time. Viveka did not go home that night. She drove 2 hours south to her mother's house on the coast. Constance was awake when she arrived, because Constance was always awake, and she opened the door before Viveka could knock, and she put her arms around her daughter without asking any questions. They sat in the kitchen for 3 hours with tea and the cats and the sound of the ocean doing what oceans do. And Viveka told her everything, and Constance listened to all of it without once saying she had known. That restraint, Viveka thought, was the most loving thing her mother had ever done for her. In the morning, Viveka made a phone call to the Moorfield Capital legal team. She spoke for 11 minutes. The team had been retained on a quiet standing basis for 6 years, waiting for exactly this. 3 things happened before Owen had finished his second cup of coffee. First, a family law attorney filed for divorce on Viveka's behalf, citing irreconcilable differences and documented infidelity. The filing included a comprehensive financial disclosure. Every mortgage payment, every insurance premium, every household expense Viveka had covered from her accounting income over 6 years, time-stamped and cross-referenced against the joint account Owen had contributed to erratically. The total was substantial. The documentation was airtight. Owen's own attorney, who reviewed the filing at noon, used the word thorough in a tone that conveyed something much less complimentary. Second, a forensic accountant began reviewing Owen's professional finances because Viveka had noticed, in the course of her own documentation, 3 discrepancies in joint tax filings that she had prepared and Owen had signed. The discrepancies were Owen's. The signatures were Owen's. The exposure was also Owen's. Third, and most significantly, the Moorfield Capital Partners Trust reached its activation threshold. Viveka Aldrin Moorfield turned 35 on a Wednesday. The trust, structured by her father, with the precision of a man who had spent a lifetime thinking about inheritance and its consequences, transferred operational authority to Viveka on the morning of her birthday. She did not announce this. She did not post about it. She did not change her email signature or update her LinkedIn, or tell anyone who was not already aware. She drove back to Portland in her Toyota. She picked up Huxley from a neighbor who had been feeding him. She gave him his evening medication, because she was the only one who knew he needed it. She sat in the house that she owned, in the city she had chosen, and she waited for Owen to understand what was happening to him. It took him 4 days. The house was in her name. He had known this theoretically, the way people know theoretical things, as data that exists without weight. The weight arrived when the divorce filing included a formal notice that his right to occupy the property was contingent on her consent, which was being withdrawn. He had 2 weeks to make alternative arrangements. His attorney confirmed there was nothing to contest. He moved his things to Deanna's apartment, which had been sized for one. The mortgage on the apartment where Deanna lived was held by a regional bank. The building itself was owned by a real estate investment group that had recently been acquired by a firm whose largest institutional stakeholder was Moorfield Capital Partners. Viveka did not own Deanna's apartment building, but she was connected to it through 2 layers of financial architecture, and the building's management company had, 2 weeks after the acquisition, begun a routine review of tenant lease structures. Viveka did not initiate this review. She simply did not ask anyone to stop it. Owen's firm began to experience its own difficulties. 2 significant projects he had been developing were contingent on permits from the city planning office. The permit review entered an extended comment period. Owen's senior partners grew impatient. His billing hours declined. One of the projects, a mixed-use development in the Lloyd district that Owen had been describing as career-defining, lost its lead investor when the investment group's fund manager concluded, after a routine portfolio review, that the project's risk profile had shifted. Owen hired a private investigator for 1 week, which told her everything she needed to know about how little he understood the situation. Phyllis called Viveka's cell 3 times. Viveka did not answer. Phyllis left voicemails that were structured identically, a disclaimer, a pivot, an appeal to shared history that rewrote Phyllis's own behavior in the most generous possible light. The 3rd voicemail used the phrase "we're family" 4 times. Viveka listened to all 3 and deleted them one after another the way she deleted spam, with the same blank efficiency. Britt sent a series of texts. The first said she was sorry and she hoped they could talk. The second said she'd heard Viveka was going through something and was here if needed. The third asked whether Viveka's firm ever took on pro bono clients for nonprofits, because Britt was thinking of starting something. Viveka read the 3rd text twice. Then she set the phone face down on the kitchen counter and did not respond to any of them. Owen called once, at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, which told her he was not sleeping well. She let it go to voicemail. He did not leave one. Deanna lasted 6 weeks in the apartment before the lease situation became complicated enough that she began staying with friends. And the nature of her arrangement with Owen became, accordingly, less convenient. Owen had presented himself, she would later tell a mutual acquaintance, as a man who had things together, a man of stability and style and professional forward momentum. What she had actually been looking at, she said, was a performance. The stability was a house he didn't own. The style was a wardrobe someone else had organized. The momentum was a career built partly on connections Viveka had cultivated through 6 years of dinner parties she had planned and hosted and cleaned up after. Stripped of the infrastructure, Owen was a man who could not find his own lease agreement and did not know which drawer it would be in because Vivica had always kept the files and he had never thought to ask where. Deanna was not interested in the version of Owen that remained. She left on a Sunday with 2 suitcases and a very clear expression on her face, and Owen sat in her half-empty apartment that he could not afford alone and felt for the first time the exact shape and weight of what he had taken for granted. It is one thing to know you have been given something. It is another thing entirely to feel its absence in every room. The architectural firm where Owen worked held its annual awards ceremony in March, 6 months after the divorce filing. It was a small, internal event. 40 people in a conference room, plaques, catered sandwiches, the kind of professional ritual that matters enormously to the people who attend it. Owen's name had been submitted for a project management award by a colleague the previous year. The award was sponsored, as it had been for the past 3 years, by the Moorfield Foundation for Design and Urban Planning, a philanthropic arm that Vivica had established, with her mother's encouragement in her father's memory. The foundation's mission statement was printed in the program. Its current director was listed, Vivica Aldrin Moorfield, director. The name had not been in the program before. It was there this year because Vivica had accepted the board's invitation to attend in person, which she had previously declined because she had been, for 6 years, trying not to be visible in Owen's professional world. She was not trying anymore. She arrived at 6:45 in a room she had helped fund. She was met at the door by the firm's managing partner, who had never met her in person and who shook her hand with the specific warmth of a person encountering someone far more important than they had prepared for. Owen was standing near the refreshments table. He saw her at the exact moment she entered. She saw him see her. She did not change her expression. She crossed the room toward the managing partner and began a conversation about the foundation's next grant cycle. Owen did not move for 30 seconds. Phyllis was not present. Britt was not present. It was just Owen in a room full of his colleagues, watching his ex-wife be introduced as the director of the organization whose name was on the plaque he had hoped to receive. The managing partner brought Vivica to the front of the room to say a few words before the awards were announced. She stood at the podium and looked out at 40 faces, some of whom she recognized from dinner parties she had organized in a house she had paid for, and she spoke for 3 minutes. She spoke about design and what it requires. She spoke about infrastructure, the unsexy, invisible kind, the load-bearing kind that nobody photographs but that holds everything else in place. She spoke about the people who build infrastructure quietly and are called efficient, or practical, or behind the scenes, and are never called essential, though that is the only accurate word. She spoke about her father, who had built things that outlasted him, and about what it means to leave something solid behind. She did not mention Owen. She did not look at him. She did not need to. Every person in that room who had attended a dinner party at the Callister house knew exactly what they were listening to. They were listening to the woman who had built the room announce, without raising her voice, that the room was hers. She stepped back from the podium. She returned to her seat. She picked up her water glass. Owen appeared at her shoulder before the first award was called. He was composed but barely. His voice was the voice of a man constructing composure in real time. Vivica, I didn't know about the foundation. I didn't know any of this. She turned her head just enough to see him. I know you didn't, Owen. Her voice was even, quiet, the same voice she used to explain complex financials to clients who were embarrassed not to understand them. You had 6 years. You could have asked. You were not interested in asking. He said something else. She did not retain it. I've already moved on, she told him. I'd encourage you to start. She turned back to the room. He stood beside her for a moment longer, suspended between the version of events he had believed and the one that was now being demonstrated to him in real time. And then he returned to his place near the back of the room, and the awards were announced, and Vivica Moorfield was thanked twice more before the evening ended, and nobody asked Owen how he was doing. The months after the ceremony did what they were going to do regardless. Owen's firm restructured, as firms in that position often do. His position was reduced. His billable hours were reassigned. The Lloyd District project was formally shelved when the permit review concluded, with a list of required modifications that exceeded the budget. He moved out of Deanna's former apartment and into a studio near his office. He paid his own utilities for the first time in 6 years, and discovered that he did not know the difference between a gas bill and a utility consolidation plan. which cost him 2 months of overpayment before he caught it. He did not catch it. His new accountant caught it. Phyllis left a final voicemail. It was 9 minutes long and contained, buried in the 4th minute, an acknowledgement that she had not been fair to Viveka, followed immediately by a pivot to how difficult this had all been for Owen, and a closing appeal for Viveka to consider what rebuilding something might look like. The word family appeared 7 times. There was not a single moment in the 9 minutes in which Phyllis appeared to understand that her son's family had required Viveka's full-time management to function, or that withdrawing that management was not cruelty but honesty. Viveka listened to the first 4 minutes. She deleted it. She called her mother on Sunday, as she always did. It was a Sunday in late June. She was sitting on the front porch of the Portland house with Huxley on her lap, a cup of coffee she had made herself because she had always been capable of making her own coffee, and the specific quality of Pacific Northwest morning light that she had driven 2 hours south and then 2 hours north again to come back to, because it was hers and she had chosen it. Her mother answered on the first ring. They talked for an hour about the foundation's new grants, about Constance's garden, which was producing more tomatoes than 2 people and 2 cats could consume, about a new client Viveka had taken on, a small green energy firm that was doing interesting things with grid storage, which she had taken on because it interested her, and she was allowed now to do things simply because they interested her. "Are you happy?" her mother asked, at some point in the middle of the hour, the way Constance always asked things, not as small talk, but as a genuine request for data. Viveka thought about it. She thought about the night outside the event venue, the cold air, the moment she had understood that the test was over. She thought about the drive south with Gus, the coast, her mother's arms, the tea. She thought about Huxley's morning medication, which she administered each day with the same careful precision she applied to everything, because something she loved needed her attention, and she gave it freely. She thought about the foundation, and the grants, and the green energy firm, and the Tuesday morning when she had sat down at a desk that was entirely her own, and had realized, for the first time in 6 years, that she had no one's calendar to manage but her own. "Yes," she said, "I think I actually am." Constance was quiet for a moment. "Good," she said. "Your father would have been insufferable about it." Viveka laughed. It was a real laugh, unperformed, the kind that arrives without warning. She looked out at the street. A neighbor's dog trotted past, leash-free, looking purposeful. The morning light came through the trees in long, flat panels. Huxley shifted on her lap and settled again, one paw wrapped around her wrist in the possessive, unconscious way of cats who have decided they belong to you. She had hidden her name to find out who she was without it. She had found, instead, 6 years of evidence that she already knew exactly who she was. She had known since she was 22, sitting beside her father's hospital bed with his hand in hers, deciding to be the kind of person who showed up. She had shown up. For 6 years. For a household, a marriage, a man, a family that received what she offered, without once asking what it cost her. The error had not been in showing up. The error had been in staying for people who had stopped deserving it. She had corrected the error. The correction was thorough. There is a particular kind of woman who holds things together without being asked, who manages systems and absorbs difficulty, and adjusts quietly to whatever the room requires. She is called practical and efficient, and behind the scenes she is called steady. She is called reliable. She is called lucky, by the people who benefit from her, to have such a settled, organized life. She is not lucky. She built it. And when she decides to stop building it for you, what you discover in the rubble is not bad luck. What you discover is what was always there, which is nothing. Nothing you made. Nothing you maintained. Nothing that belongs to you. She built the room. She managed the room. She left the room quietly, without announcement. And the room came down around the people who had never once looked up from what they were taking to notice who was holding up the ceiling. If this story stayed with you, if you recognize something in it, something you've been carrying, or something you're finally ready to set down, we'd be grateful to have you with us. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We tell stories for the ones who build in silence. We have another one waiting for you.